Welcome to the deep dive. We cut through the noise to get you the insights you need.
Glad to be here.
So most people probably think, okay, work longer, get a bigger pension.
Simple. Right. That's the common assumption, yeah.
Well, today we're digging into this really unique study from Finland. It kind of turns that idea on its head, especially when you look at gender and socioeconomic equality.
It really does. And the foundation for this deep dive is just incredible. We're talking about 50 years of precise register-based data.
Register-based, so like official records.
Exactly. Government records tracking actual employment histories, actual first-year-old age pension income for a whole group, a cohort, who retired back in 2011.
Okay, so no fuzzy memories or people maybe, slightly exaggerating on a survey.
None of that. That's what makes this data so powerful. It bypasses all those common issues, giving us a much, much clearer picture.
And then right away, there's this finding that just jumps out. The study found the differences in how long people actually worked. Well, they were surprisingly small between men and women and across different job types.
Yeah, modest is the word they used.
It really made me pause because my gut feeling was that the differences would be much larger. So that sets up the big question, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If the working lives are pretty similar in length, why aren't the pension incomes? Why the big gap there?
Right. So that's our mission for this deep dive, isn't it? To unpack how Finland's pension system, which is quite sophisticated, tries to handle these inequalities.
And help you, our listener, understand this really complex dance between work, what you earn, and how secure you are in retirement using this fascinating real-world case.
Okay, let's set the scene then. Why Finland? What makes it such a good place for this kind of study?
Well, Finland's often held up as, a very gender-equal society.
Yeah, you hear about high female labor participation.
Yeah.
What are the numbers?
Pretty high. About 74% for women aged 15-64 versus 77% for men. And women have been nearly half the workforce, like 47-48%, since way back in the 80s.
Plus, I read Finnish women are often more educated than men.
That's true. And the country has these strong policies to help balance work and family. Things like separate taxes for spouses, really good public daycare.
So you'd think, okay, perfect equality baked in, right?
But here's where it gets interesting. Or, well, more complex, perhaps. Despite all those positives, the labor market isn't perfectly level.
How so?
Well, for one, women's wages are still lower, on average around 80% of men's wages. And they're more likely to be in fixed-term jobs, though part-time work itself is actually pretty low compared to other countries.
Okay, so a wage gap exists.
Yes, and critically, there's what we call strong occupational segregation, just like in other Nordic countries, really.
Meaning men and women tend to work in different kinds of jobs.
Exactly. And often, the female-dominated sectors are lower paying. Think administrative work, care work, those tend to be predominantly women. Whereas manual jobs, upper management, even farming or being self-employed, those are more male-dominated in the cohort they studied.
So these different pathways, they create different earnings potentials right from the start.
Precisely. And that has major knock-on effects for pensions down the line, even if the length of time working isn't hugely different.
That occupational segregation point feels really key. It's like, even with supportive family policies, if job types themselves are segregated by pay and gender,
it creates an underlying structural inequality that's hard to overcome just through pension design alone.
Right. Okay, so we've got the context. Let's get into the mechanics. The Finnish pension system itself. You mentioned three parts.
Yes. There's the main one, the earnings-related pension. That's based on your work and income.
Okay. Income smoothing. Makes sense.
Then there's the national pension, which is residence-based. And finally, the guarantee pension. These last two are more about basic security, preventing poverty.
How do they interact? Especially that national pension.
That's the clever bit. The earnings-related one covers almost everyone who works. But the national pension, which is funded by taxes, not contributions from your earnings, it actually decreases as your earnings-related pension gets bigger.
So it fills the gaps.
Exactly. It steps in when your earnings-related pension is low or non-existent. There's a threshold back in 2012. If your earnings-related pension was over about $12,258 a month, you wouldn't get the national or guarantee pension.
And the guarantee pension is just the absolute floor.
Yeah, the minimum safety net. It was around 714 euros a month in 2012. So they worked together to provide both an earnings link and a basic level of security.
And there was a big reform, wasn't there, in 2005?
Yes, very significant. That reform really tightened the link between your entire working life and your pension benefit.
How did it do that?
Before, it might have focused more on later career earnings. But the 2005 reform calculated the pension based on your earnings across your whole career, basically from age 18 up to 67. Every year counts.
So no more focusing just on the last few years of higher salary.
Pretty much. It aimed for a more direct link to lifetime contributions. They also introduced different accrual rates, the percentage of your earnings added to your pension pot each year.
Accrual rates.
Yeah, and they were age dependent. For example, they brought in this super accrual rate of 4.5% if you work between 63 and 67.
An incentive to keep people working longer.
Clearly. So this whole reform really shaped how working life length translated directly into pension income for the specific group this study looked at, the ones retiring in 2011.
Okay, which brings us back to that surprising finding number 1.
Right. The modest differences in the length of working lives.
Despite everything we just discussed about segregation and potential career breaks.
The actual median working life for this whole group was 37.6 years, and the differences based on gender or job type were, well, small.
How small are we talking for gender?
About 2 years. Men worked on average 2 years longer than women in this cohort, but the researchers stressed that's very small in international comparison.
2 years. Okay, that is surprisingly small on a lifetime scale. Why so small?
Well, Finland already had high female employment rates, as we said, and also there was this interesting rule before 2005. Parental leave could actually count towards your pension accumulation as if you were working normally, provided you were under a valid contract and came back within a year.
Okay. So that might have softened the impact of childcare breaks on the working life length calculation.
It likely contributed, yeah. Though, of course, women still being primary carers probably explains the remaining 2-year gap.
Makes sense. And socioeconomic differences.
Yeah.
Like between job types.
Even smaller than the gender difference. Get this. Manual workers' median working life was only 0.4 years, like 5 months shorter than upper non-manual employees.
Less than half a year. How does that work?
Well, one plausible reason is that manual workers often start their careers earlier. Upper non-manual folks might spend more years in education initially, but then maybe work a bit later in life. So it kind of balances out in terms of total years worked.
Okay, so the time spent working is surprisingly similar across the board,
Relatively speaking, yes.
which makes the next finding even more stark, despite these modest differences in working years.
The differences in pension income were pronounced. Really significant.
Let's quantify that. The gender pension gap.
Women's pension income was roughly a quarter, 25% lower than men's.
Wow. 25%. That's huge.
It is. And it largely mirrors the wage gap, which we mentioned is around 20% in Finland. Often, pension gaps end up being even wider than wage gaps during working life. It's a pattern seen elsewhere, too.
And what about the socioeconomic differences in pension income?
This was maybe even more striking. Those differences were larger than the gender gap.
Really?
Yeah. Upper non-manual employees, so managers, professionals, they had the highest pensions by far. Their income was 2.4 times higher than farmers.
Farmers had the lowest.
Farmers had the lowest, followed by manual workers. And this pattern, this ranking, held true whether you looked at just men or just women within those groups.
So your job type, your socioeconomic status, was an even bigger predictor of your pension size than your gender, although both mattered a lot.
Exactly. It's like those earnings differences we talked about earlier, linked to occupational segregation, they just accumulate massively over a lifetime and translate into these really big pension disparities.
So if you have lower earnings or maybe a slightly shorter career, what happens? This is where that national pension comes back in, I guess.
Absolutely critical. This is where you see the cushioning effect. Look at the numbers. Only 70% of women received only the earnings-related pension.
Meaning 30% needed something else.
Right. Nearly 1 in 3 women also received the national pension top-up. Compare that to men, 85% got only the earnings-related one, so only about 1 in 7 men needed the national pension.
So much more relevant for women overall.
Definitely. And for the people who got both types of pension, the earnings-related and the national one, the study found that the gender and socioeconomic differences in their total pension income were actually quite small.
So it really leveled the playing field for that group.
It made a huge difference. The national pension typically made up about 20% of their monthly income. The study calls it a significant contribution to compensating the inequalities.
And this cushioning effect, was it across the board?
It was obvious among women in practically every social class, except for the very top earners, the upper non-manual group, where it wasn't really needed.
Right.
And it faded away the longer your working life was, naturally, because your earnings-related pension would be higher.
Mm.
It also really helped groups like farmers.
Who you said had the lowest pensions?
Yeah, farmers often had long working lives, but because their reported income for pension purposes can be lower, their earnings-related pensions were low. The national pension provided a vital boost for them.
It really shows how that non-contributory part can target support effectively.
It's a real example of that social solidarity principle in action.
Okay, so the system cushions the blow. But the study did confirm, generally, longer work means higher pension, right?
Oh, definitely. A clear link. Longer working life equals higher monthly benefit. No surprise there. But there's a nuance.
Always a nuance.
Yes. It's about how that pension grows with extra work. An extra year of work actually increased the earnings-related pension relatively faster for women in most groups compared to men.
Relatively faster.
Yeah,
Because they started lower.
exactly. If you start from a lower base, the percentage increase looks bigger. So for upper non-manual women, an extra year boosted their pension by maybe 4.5% compared to 3.7% for men in the same group.
But in actual euros or...
That's the catch. In absolute terms, the actual amount of extra money per month, men still saw steeper increases from working longer because their earnings base was higher to begin with.
Right. So relative progress doesn't mean absolute parity. The underlying wage gap still dictates the ultimate reward for working longer.
Precisely. It underscores how deep that initial earnings difference runs.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up. Key takeaways from this fascinating Finnish deep dive.
Well, the big one is that core finding. Finland's managed to get pretty small differences in how long people work across gender and class.
That's surprisingly small differences in working life length.
But the differences in pension income are still really pronounced. Big gaps remain.
And that second part, the national non-contributory pension, plays a huge role in softening those income gaps, right?
Absolutely crucial. It acts as a buffer, especially for women and people in jobs like manual labor or farming. They often face that double risk, lower pay associated with their job types, sometimes intersecting with gender pay gaps. The national pension provides significant help.
And it hammers home the point that just getting people to work the same number of years isn't the magic bullet for pension equality.
Not at all. If you don't address the structural issues, the wage gaps, the occupational segregation during people's working lives, you're still going to end up with significant pension gaps. Equalizing working time alone isn't enough.
So the provocative thought to leave our listeners with.
I think it's this. If a country like Finland, which is seen as highly gender equal and has this really developed multi-pillar pension system, still struggles to fully erase these pension income gaps just by focusing on working life length, what does that tell us about the challenge globally? It really suggests that policies need to go way beyond just tinkering with retirement benefits.
You mean tackling the root causes earlier on?
Exactly. To genuinely reduce pension gaps, you likely need interventions much earlier. Focusing on equal opportunities in education, breaking down occupational segregation, tackling wage discrimination, basically addressing labor market inequalities throughout the entire working life.
So the pension gap is really a reflection of inequalities built up over decades.
That seems to be the clear message, something for all of us to think about, definitely.
Absolutely. That's all we have time for on this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.